Okay, we have really two parts to tonight's shir.
Eat.
Let's get this source sheet up there. The first is I was looking and is really kind of straight borrowing from Nechama Leibowitz in one of her essays on the Parsha, but it got me thinking about a broader question, which I want to explore together, and still trying to piece it all together and make a comprehensive picture out of it. So I certainly welcome anyone's thoughts or reflections on this. We're in Parshat Shemot, and which is, of course, the beginning of Sefer Shemot, the second book. Um, and this is the book in which we make the transition from I guess what we'll call a family unit to a national unit, to becoming the Jewish people, to becoming a nation. Um, at least, the stories are extremely familiar to us. We begin with the Jews, or the Israelites in Egypt, um, the decrees of the Paro, the decrees of the new king against them, the rise of Moshe, and by the end of our Parsha, of Parshat Shemot, we have Moshe's first appearance before Paro in the name of Hashem, demanding to let his people go. Paro, of course, refuses, and next week we'll begin with the unfolding of the Esser Makot, the 10 plagues, and the leading to the redemption and the Exodus in a few more weeks from now. When Hashem first appears to Moshe at the burning bush, um, it's a lengthy negotiation. I know we spent one of our previous years looking at this episode. Um, and of course, Moshe, as we know, is not an eager participant in this mission at first. He refuses on many different grounds. Hashem has to first convince Moshe before he convinces anyone or anything else. And in the course of their back and forth, we'll call it negotiations, um, at one point Hashem tells Moshe as follows. And I apologize. I noticed just before the shir began, I forgot to number the sources in the source packet. So I'll keep us on track. But if you printed it out, just I'll announce what page it is, and you can follow along that way. Um, so Hashem tells Moshe, "Lech v'asafta et ziknei Yisrael v'amarta aleihem Hashem Elokei avotechem nir'a Elai Elokei Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov lemor Hakod pakadati etchem v'tasui lachem b'Mitzrayim." Go and gather the elders of Israel and say to them, Hashem, the God of your fathers, appeared to me, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to say, Hakod pakadati etchem, I have surely remembered you and that which has been done to you in Egypt. V'omar ale etchem me'inei oni Mitzrayim, el eretz Canaan, HaKnani v'Achiti v'Amori v'Apizi v'Achivi v'Yebusi, el eretz avad chalav v'devash, and I will say that I will take you out of from the suffering of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Yebusites to the land flowing with milk and honey. Shamu lekolecha, they will listen to you. Uvata ata v'ziknei Israel el melech Mitzrayim, v'amartem elav Hashem Elokei Hayivim nikra elenu, v'ata neochana derech shloshet yamim b'amidbar v'nizbachal Hashem Elokeinu. They will listen to you, and you and the elders of Israel will go to the king of Egypt, and you will say to him, Hashem, the God of the Hebrews, has called to us, and now let us go for 3 days to worship God, Hashem, our God. Okay, so that's our first source. We're going to be exploring tonight the Zekeinim, the elders, who they are, what they represent. So in Hashem's first appearance to Moshe, he tells him, you're going to go back to Egypt, you're going to gather the nation, you're going to speak to the elders, and you're going to tell them that God has appeared to me and he is, and we're going to go and together let Paro know that he should let us go. Okay, that's the first that's our first source, our jumping off points. The next source, Moshe finally accepts the mission, goes back. We have also what we explored in a previous year, the very strange incident at the Malone with Moshe's son seemingly not having been circumcised. His wife saves the day. We have that whole strange thing. Moshe reunites with Aaron, with his brother. And we see in the second source here, Shemot chapter 4, verse 27, Vayomer Hashem el Aharon, Lech likrat Moshe amidbara, Vayelech leifkisheu bahar Elokim vayishak lo. Right, so the final point that the final concession, as it is, that Hashem makes to Moshe is that Aaron will go with him to Paro. And so God instructs Aaron, go greet Moshe, and the two brothers are reunited and they hug each other. Vayagid Moshe le'Aharon et kol divrei Hashem asher shlacho et kol otot asher tzivahu. Moshe tells Aaron everything that happened, all the signs, everything that God told him. Vayelech Moshe v'Aharon vayasfu et kol ziknei bnei Israel. Moshe and Aaron go and they gather all the elders of Israel. Vayidaber Aharon et kol hadvarim asher diber Hashem el Moshe vayasa otot leinei ha'am. Right, as God promised, Aaron is the spokesperson. So Aaron tells them everything that God had commanded Moshe, and he does the signs that God had given them. Vaya'amen ha'am, vayishmeu ki pakad Hashem et bnei Yisrael, v'chi ra'at onyam, vayikdu vayishtachavu. The nation believed, and they heard that God had remembered the Jewish people, and that he sees their suffering, and they bowed down. Okay, so everything is according to plan, and so it seems.
I can't find the sharing.
Say again?
Did you stop sharing? Or
Did I?
lose it?
No.
Oh,
No.
okay. I lost it, so I'm gonna try to find it.
Okay, it's here. Should be here.
I got it. Okay,
All
thanks.
right. Um, okay, and then we come to chapter 5, when they actually go to Paro. V'achar ba'u Moshe v'Aharon, vayomu el Paro, ko amar Hashem Elokei Yisrael, shalach et ami vayachogu li bamidbar. Then Moshe and Aaron came to Paro, and they said, "This is what Hashem, the God of the Hebrews, says. The God of the Israelites says, let my people go, and they'll worship me in the desert." Vayomer Paro mi Hashem asher shma b'kolo l'shalach et Yisrael lo yadati et Hashem v'gam et Yisrael lo ashaleach. Paro says, "Who is this God of whom you speak? I've never heard of him. I'm not going to let the Jewish people go." Vayomu Elokei ha'ivim nikra ilenu neocha na derech shloshet yamim v'amidbar v'nizbacha l'Hashem Elokeinu pen yifkainu b'dever o b'cherev. He said, "No, the God of the Hebrews has appeared, has called out to us. Let us go and worship him for 3 days in the desert, lest he punish us in some way." Vayomer Alehem Melech Mitzrayim Lama Moshe va'Aaron tafriu et ha'am mima'asav l'chu l'sivotam. The king of Egypt says to them, "Moshe and Aaron, why are you disturbing the nation from its work? Let them go back to their suffering." Vayomer Paro hin rabim ata am haaretz v'ishbatem otam misivotam. Paro says the nation is great, and you're going to take them away from their work. Okay, so what jumps out at you in this exchange with Paro?
He doesn't even want to give them the 3 days.
Right, so Paro is very resolute in not giving in one iota, right? And as we know in the continuation, he even makes it worse for them, right? He makes them he no longer provides the straw for making the bricks, and he keeps the same quota. So he's very resolute, very stern in not giving in one bit.
He doesn't. He seems to like make an issue out of like, who is this Hashem?
Yeah,
Like
so
they have
we have
to.
a whole theological issue argument going on as well. It's not just about letting the people go worship, right? And it's also just in question, again, not for tonight, but how sincere is this request? Let us go worship God for 3 days. Or is that really what they have in mind, or are they
Hmm.
looking
Hmm.
for an easy exit out forever? That's another interesting question.
I'm thinking, who is it who's speaking to Pharaoh?
Okay.
Moses and Aaron speaking together, or
Yeah, so that's what it says. So previously we have been told that Aaron would be the spokesperson, but the Torah presents it as they're speaking in the plural, Vayomru el Paro.
Hmm.
They said to Paro. Then in verse 3 again, Vayomru Elokei v'mikra Elenu. They
Hmm.
said. So they're speaking in one voice, whether that literally means they're both speaking or they're seen as being a unified front. That's another interesting question because Moshe was very resolute in not wanting to speak at all.
Because he started.
Okay, he stuttered. Yeah, that's one reason that he gives. Um, but who goes to Paro?
Just
Who?
Moshe and Aaron,
Just Moshe and Aaron. So who doesn't go to Paro?
Mm.
the elders.
The Zekeinim. There's no mention of the elders coming to Paro. Okay, we're going to come back to this question. Right, so this is the question that Nechama Leibowitz deals with, and we're going to come back to it. But I think structurally, I think it makes more sense to go to my little thought project first. So we're going to go to the top of page 4. And again, I apologize that the sources are not numbered tonight. Okay, so the first, even
Could I just
before
say
that.
one thing,
Yeah, please.
Rabbi? Um, I may have mentioned that my dissertation was on message communication, and
Mm-hmm.
this is one of those cases where what Hashem told Moshe to say was not really exactly what Moshe said. Um, he did use the uh, send forth my people, but it was really my sons, but anyway, my people. But there was no mention of a festival in the wilderness.
Right.
So it's one of these things where that, in combination with the elders not coming with them, that helps one to understand that somebody who is sent as a messenger in ancient Near East, depending upon how well they thought they were in the eyes of the one that sent them, that they can improvise as they go. So that was a very interesting to me that they chose to speak in that way, which is a way they thought perhaps Carl would accept more than emphasizing the fact, as Hashem says, that this is my preeminent son.
Right.
And I will kill your firstborn son. Well, they don't tell him that.
Right. Right.
So
So yeah, so
it's
there's I
really,
mean
really
the
interesting.
and the commentaries deal with this question extensively
Yeah.
also. It's a really
Mm-hmm.
interesting question.
Yeah.
The question that piqued my interest for this year at least is who are these Zekeinim? God tells Moshe, go gather the Zekeinim.
Hmm.
Who are they? Anyone want to venture a guess or put any theories out there?
I imagine that they're tribal leaders.
Okay.
So they're, yeah, that third generation, I guess.
The third generation. From whom?
They are the grandchildren of the 12 or 13.
Grandchildren of the 12. So
The 12,
Yaakov's great grandchildren,
right?
the same generation as Moshe.
Because of Yosef getting to see Menashe's kid. Was that
His
it?
great grandchildren,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
And the fourth generation comes out.
Okay. Any other initial thoughts or theories on who these Akenim are?
yeah, could they be people who remember Yosef? Something about their age is important.
Okay. So maybe they're people who remember Yosef, right? In contrast, maybe to Paro.
Hmm.
right? Vayakam melech hadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yadat Yosef. Right, there's also an interesting medrash which I've also presented previously, when God tells Moshe to go and tell them pakod pakadati. So there's a beautiful medrash that says that this is I should have brought all these sources. I should have gone on to 12 pages. I'm sorry. But there's a beautiful medrash that says that they didn't believe Moshe and Aaron that God had spoken to them until they used this phrase pakod pakadati, because when Yosef is on his deathbed, he makes a promise, pakod yifkod Elokim etchem v'alitem et atzmotai mizeh, that God will surely remember you and you'll eventually leave Egypt, and then you should bring my remains with you. That's how Yosef says he wants to be buried in the land of Israel ultimately. So the Medrash says that there was some secret language that was passed on, right? And it begins all the way with Abraham, Atsamta Mimenu, and then with Yitzchak, it's no, Yitzchak is Atsamta Mimenu. Abraham is, I'm gonna forget what it is. Whatever. It says that from Abraham there was some secret language, some key words that were passed on from generation to generation that let them know that this is the secret of redemption. And it happens to be that each generation, their key word was one of the letters in the Hebrew alphabet, which has a different form when it comes at the end of the word. It's sofit. So that's another cool thing. But so with Yosef, it was pakod yifkod, that God will surely remember, and that's the language that Yosef uses. So Beatrice, right, maybe there is some connection between the Zekeinim and Yosef in that regard. Okay, so the first set of sources is what we've seen already. Is just from from the scene at the burning bush and from when Moshe first goes back. And then if we go to the bottom of page 4, really the top of page 5, I guess, is chapter 12 of Sefer Shemot, as they are preparing for the Korban Pesach and the ultimate Exodus. We read, Vayikra Moshe l'chol ziknei Yisrael, Vayomer aleihem ashchu kirchu lachem tzon lemishpechoteim lepeshachatu hapasach. Moshe calls the elders of Israel and he says to them, take a sheep eat one sheep per family and sacrifice the paschal offering. Right, in all the details of that, but the message is passed to the elders who then transmit it to the rest of the generation of the nation. When we come a little bit further on, sorry, I'm on the wrong page. Okay, here we go. You didn't tell me I was reading the wrong passage.
I
Okay.
had a feeling, but I didn't want to say anything and
Okay.
be wrong twice.
The next time we see it is in chapter 17. So this is the first time that the nation is without water and complains, right after the splitting of the Red Sea. Vayarv ha'ami Moshe, vayomutinu lanu mayim, right? They fight with Moshe, they say, give us water. Vaitzma sham ha'am lamayim, vayalin ha'am al Moshe. The nation is thirsty for water, and they complain to Moshe. Vayomer lama zeh litanu mimitzrayim, la'amito tivet kol b'ni bet mikrai batzama. Why did you take me out of Egypt so that I'll die in the desert? Vaitzak Moshe el Hashem lemor ma'aseh la'am hazeh od ma'atus kaluni. Moshe cries to God and says, what am I going to do with this nation? In a little bit, they're going to destroy me. They're going to kill me. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. God says to Moshe, verse 5, Avor lifnei ha'am v'kach itcha miziknei Yisrael. God says to Moshe, pass before the nation and take with you from the elders of Israel, umatcha asher hikita bo te'or, kach biatcha v'halachta, and take the stick which you hit the Nile with, and you should go. Right, I'll stand in front of you, hit the rock, and water will come out of the rock. So this first miracle that Moshe does in the desert after the complete salvation from Egypt is done with the elders as his helping hands, I guess we can call them.
Witnesses.
Say again?
Witnesses. They were
Witnesses.
witnesses.
Well, maybe, but the entire nation sees it, right? It wasn't hidden from them. That's an interesting question. How close was everyone else to it? That's an interesting question. Maybe they were there as witnesses. But they're there in some prominent role. But yeah, that's an interest I hadn't thought about. Maybe they were there as witnesses. The next time we encounter the elders, the Zekeinim, is in chapter 24, as we're recapping the events from Har Sinai, from the revelation at Sinai. Vayomer Hashem o Moshe Elai hahara vayisham etznelachat luchot ha'even haTorah mitzvah asher katavti lahorotam. God tells to Moshe, come up the mountain and I will give you the tablets and the Torah and the mitzvot, which I have written to instruct the Jewish people. Vayakam Moshe v'Yoshua misharto, vaya'al Moshe el har Elokim. Moshe and Yehoshua, his helper, his servant, went up, and Moshe ascended the mountain of God. To the elders, he said, stay back behind until we return to you. Aaron and Hor will be with you. I don't even know how to translate the rest of that verse. You have Aaron and Hor with you. Let anyone who has a legal matter approach them. I'm not sure if that's the best translation of that phrase either. Vaya'al Moshe el hahar v'yachas ha'anan et hahar. Moshe goes up to the mountain and it's covered in a cloud, and the glory of God rests on the mountain. The elders are singled out in the revelation. It seems that they are able to go further up the mountain than the rest of the people, not quite as far as Yehoshua, but to the same level as Aaron and Hor. They're given a special designation, a special place in this revelation.
Would these people potentially be the first Rabbanim? That is, they are as close as you can get to Moshe as he goes up the mountain where he goes alone, but they are as close as possible so that they're Krove Malchut, so to speak. And that means that they have more opportunity, perhaps, to hear, to see, to understand what happens and what is supposed to be understood.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, is what is their, it's clear that they have a role of leadership and prominence in the nation. What is that role, right? You said, are they like Rabbanim? Then you said they're Krove Malchus. So are they religious leaders? Are they political leaders? What are they? What is their role? Right. So remember are they the shul board? The shul board has no power, right? We all know that. There's no board members on here, are there?
Being recorded. It's being recorded.
I know. Yeah. So that's an interesting question. Is what is the nature of their role? Is it a religious role? Is it political? Is it something else? And remember that, right? Ultimately, religious leadership is given to Shevet Levi, although maybe it was originally intended to go to the Bechorim, to the firstborns. So we don't know what the role is of the Zekeinim. We know that they have a role, but it's not clear what that role is.
That role is going to become active, though, possibly. It's something which is there in potentio, as they say in the fancy Latin, I think, that potentially they can become the Sanhedrin. Potentially they can be the Ziknei Ha'am. Potentially
they are the Ziknei Ha'am. They are.
But I mean, they are the elders, but the elders in the sense of being the ones to whom one goes in order to find out what is permitted, what is not permitted, what has happened already, and this is a repetition, or was it hinted at? So that they're the Adim.
Yeah, maybe.
And And by standing and doing nothing but observing carefully, they have an important role because in addition to a written, Moshe writes how many copies of the Sefer Torah? At least one. There are two sets of the Luchot,
Hmm.
one that's shattered and the other that remains.
Right.
And one of the issues of how to you have hundreds of thousands of people. They have to learn from the teacher who's got his training directly from the message, directly from Rabboni Shalom. But that's hard to do. They
Yeah.
need a clear text. They need access to the text. They need to have contact with people who've had contact with people, uh, so that it's a very social thing. It tightens the experience of the revelation so that it's a fabric made up of people and their memories and their
Yeah, so
positions.
so it's also an interesting question about, right, we call them the Zekeinim, the elders, right? So how crucial is age in this role, right? Is it really is it the older generation, or is it some sort of position of leadership, which is called, that where you trust the experience, but maybe someone, a super qualified 25-year-old might also be designated as an elder. I don't know. I don't know. But it gets a bit more, and so that's sort of, I think those are the
Hmm.
primary sources for it. The next couple sources are later on in Chumash. So even though it says on your sheet Shemot 11:25, it should be Bamidbar. Should be I just wrote the wrong. I was so used to writing all the Shemot sources. I apologize for that. But Vayeved Hashem be'anan. So this is with again after one of the complaints. Vayeved Hashem be'anan v'yidaber elav vayatzel min haruach asher alav vayitin al shivim ish hazikenim. So God descends. This is again after the nation complains. Moshe wants, again wants to that is at his wit's end. He doesn't know what to do. So God appears in a cloud and he speaks to him and he takes from the spirit which was on Moshe and he gives it to the 70 Ish Hazikenim, elder men. Vayikinoach aleim aruach, vayitnabu v'lo yasafu. When this spirit rested on them, they prophesied and did not stop. It says here, did not continue. I'm not sure. They had a prophetic moment. Um, so this tells us that the normal role of a zaken is not that of a navi, right? That it was something abnormal that now they're able to prophesy. But that it's not just a political thing, right? We generally assume that to be a prophet, you need to have some religious status, some spiritual status. So they seem to have that. And then in Sefer Devarim, this is interesting because it's describing future what will happen in the future. So this is the first example in Sefer Devarim of the Zekeinim is kikach ish isha uba'aleha usneah. If a man marries a woman and is intimate with her, and it's sneah. We've said that lisno doesn't mean to hate, but he no longer wants to be married to her. Nisam la alilut dvarim v'otzia la'Hashem ra v'amar et ha'isha zot lakachti ve'ekrav eleha v'lo matzati la betulim. He makes a claim that she was not a virgin when they were married. V'lakacha viha na'ara v'ima v'otziu et betulei ha'ne'ara l'ziknei ha'ir ha'sha'ara. So the girl's parents take proof that she was a virgin. Many say this refer, a bloody sheet or some other proof that she was in fact a virgin at the time of marriage. And they take her to Ziknei Ha'ir, to the elders of the city, to the gate. V'amar v'yanara zakinim et bitina tati lishazeh lisha v'isnaeha. And the father says to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man in marriage, and now he no longer wants to be with her. Hinehu samla alilot varim, and he has brought a false accusation against her, saying she was not a virgin at the time of marriage. and they check the simla, the dress, the sheets, whatever the cloth is that they check. And so then the elders are responsible for punishing this man if he in fact was lying. Okay, so the elders have a role in the leadership, even once the nation is settled. And then again, in the next and final source from the Chumash with the Zekeinim, um, in the case of Yibum, in the case of levirate marriage, right? So when a man is married, dies before having children, so his closest brother is supposed to take his wife in marriage, and the first child that is results from that marriage should be named after the deceased brother. So the Torah tells us, tells us this situation. So the firstborn child of the levirate marriage should be named after the deceased brother, so that his name not be erased from the Jewish people. If the brother does not want to do this levirate marriage, so he takes the Yavama, his sister-in-law, who's supposed to be his wife, to the gate to the elders. And the woman says, my brother-in-law does not want to restore or maintain his brother's name in the Jewish people. He does not want to do this levirate marriage with me. So they go through the ceremony, which we know as chalitza. So the Zekeinim have a role once the Jewish people are settled in the land of Israel. There is a continued role for the Zekeinim, right? Whether that's seen as the local based in or whether that's something else is an interesting question. So we've seen a bunch of sources that talk about these Zekeinim.
There's another one, though.
Yeah, what's that?
There's another very big one that you did not include, and that's the one about the elders gazing at Hashem at Har Sinai and being punished for it. So this group that received prophecy of 70 was not the same group that they started out with.
Okay.
So that's raises some questions about their capacity for serving Hashem, because they did something, according to Rashi, and the Rebbe also accepts this, they did something that they were not told to do. In other words, and they of course sat there and ate, well, kind of like watching TV or something,
So I just are they described there as Zekeinim? I think it's El Atzilei B'nai Israel.
Yes, they are. That's right, nobles, right?
Right, nobles. So that's why it didn't come up in this, because I did a search for Zekeinim. But the Rashi is
that it was not Avihu and the elders.
Right.
That they all. Oh, so that's where that comes from.
Okay.
That's right.
So it is an interesting question that Anne raises, though, that putting aside whether that incident is referring to Zekeinim or someone else, but that's right, the question of, are the Zekeinim one right set of unique individuals in each generation, or is it sort of a position where there's some fluidity in who has the title? That's a really interesting question also. So yeah, Amos Chacham tells us, right? This is the Dot Mikra, wonderful contemporary commentary on Tanakh, which is written from a religious perspective, but brings in many academic theories and explanations as well. So he writes on this: Ziknei Yisrael Hamurim Kan Hem Hamanhigim Sheberosh Ha'am. The elders, the Ziknei Yisrael, are the leaders at the head of the nation. Mikan Shamanu Shegam B'Yamei Shibudam Hayu Yisrael B'Mitzrayim Zekeinim Mishalahem. And from here, right, he's commenting on the first time when God tells Moshe, go to the elders, go to the Zekeinim, and they'll go with you to Paro. From here, we see that even during their servitude, they had some leadership group. They had their own group of elders. Minahalim et inyanei ha'am, and they administered the matters of the people. היו הזקנים האלה נועדים לאסיפה בעת הצורך לדון בצורכי השעה. These elders would convene whenever there was a matter that they had to deal with or contend with. Nachum Sarna similarly says, the elders, Moshe's first concern in his new role must be to win the confidence and support of the acknowledged leaders of the people. These are the elders, Zekeinim, who are frequently mentioned in the Exodus narratives, although little information about them is offered. The institution of elders is rooted in the tribal patriarchal system that shaped the character of Israelite society in early times. And he tells us the rich Mari archives dealing with Northwest Semite, I have no idea what this is talking about, with Northwest Semite tribes show that the Council of Elders was entrusted with considerable authority, judicial and political. Okay, every group, every nation, every group of clan, nation, whatever we want to call them, had some elders, right? And just take for granted that there was a some leadership in place, and we don't have to be too concerned about who they were, right? This is just sort of the way that all ancient societies were structured and functioned.
Mari is a very interesting place. I've mentioned it a couple times before. I read in the archives when I did my own work. Mari is at the northern part of the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, and it was very close to where we think Avraham Avinu and his family was up there when they moved up from Ur Kasdim.
Okay.
And these archives come from the last gasp of the Sumerian kingdoms. A lot of these people were still there at around 2000, and they intersected with the groups, like they would call them, the Chabivru, a word that is intriguingly close to the word Hebrews, and described their lives. And they were the ones who are famous for their donkey caravans and so on. But then there also, of course, are people in cities and places that they would be talking about as well. The Sumerians are the first ones to really build really big cities at all. Right. So they're just fascinating because they intersect across so many things. So that's where they are, and that's where they came from.
All right, thank you for that. Rashi points us in a slightly different take on this, basing himself on the Gemara in Yoma, which we're not going to look at the entire Gemara, but Rashi says, Et Ziknei Yisrael, Miyuchadim liyeshiva. Singled out, it's translated here as to attend meetings, but if you look in the Gemara in Yoma, it seems when it says Miyuchadim liyeshiva, it means yeshiva. These are yeshiva students. And so they are people who sat and learned. Im tomar Zekeinim stam, efshar lo le'asof Zekeinim shel shishim ribo, right? If you say it just means old people and not some specific subgroup, how could you gather all the elders of a nation of 600,000 people or 2 million people, right? Depending how you count. So he says that they have some learning background, right? Which adds to it, back to Robert's point, seems to add to that there's a religious component to being a zaken. It's not just to be old and wise, but to be steeped in Torah tradition. Whatever that means, again, whatever that means at the time that Moshe is coming and speaking to Bnei Israel. One more source on the Zekeinim. Again, you can look at the Gemara and Yom on your own, but one more source in the Shemot Rabbah, it says, Vayelech Moshe v'Aaron vayasfu. Moshe and Aaron went and gathered the elders. Amar Rabbi Akiva lama nimshalu Yisrael ka'of. Rabbi Akiva says, why are the Jewish people compared to a bird? Ma of eino poreach ela biknafayim, af Yisrael einan yecholim la'amod ela bazekinim. Just as a bird can only fly with its wings, so too the Jewish people can only stand because of their elders. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but that it's somehow essential to the Jewish people's sustained existence is to have this class of elders.
It's not unique to Jews, though.
Right,
A
right.
lot of culture, the traditional culture where they have traditions that are handed down orally, verbally, or in writing, from one generation to the next, and so on over 10, 15, 20 generations. It's it's inherent to, I would suggest it's inherent to most human cultures around the planet.
Yeah, yeah. It's not surprising that there is right. We know about it. We know about it from learning about American history, Native Americans. That there's yeah, there that the elders are source of wisdom. Um, and so just interesting to note, we skipped over this at the beginning, but in the end of Sefer Breshit, I'm back on page 4. When Yaakov dies, right? This is what we read in Shul this past Shabbos. When Yaakov dies and Yosef asks him, "Can I please go bury my father back in the family burial plot?" So Paro tells him, "Alek for et avicha kasher hishbiacha. Go bury your father as he made you swear." Vayal Yosef likbor et aviv. Yosef went to bury his father. Vayalu ito kol avdei Paro ziknei beito v'chol ziknei eretz Mitzrayim. And with him went the servants of Paro, the elders of his house, and the elders of Egypt. So this institution of Zekeinim, again, it's not unique to Bnei Israel. It's not unique to the Jewish people. Um, so we'll come back to the. So I just got again sort of swept into this rabbit hole of who are these Zekeinim that God singles out and that seem to play an essential role, at least in the very beginning of Moshe's mission. Who are they? I'm not sure. And we'll come back to that in a moment. So back to the original question that sparked this whole thing, which is when we read about God telling Moshe, go with Aaron and bring the elders with you, it seems the elders don't make it to Paro's palace when they actually deliver the message. So there's one school of thought that says that's just an incorrect reading of the psukim. God tells Moshe, you should bring the elders with you. Of course, the elder, right? We see Moshe goes, speaks to the elders, they believe him, they go with him. Of course, the elders are there the whole time. So we have Abraham ben Harambam, the Rambam's son, even Caspi, the Shadal, all say in bringing various logical proofs. Of course, the elders were with Moshe and Aaron when they spoke to Paro, but they were secondary characters. They weren't as important. They weren't the key messengers, and so the Torah doesn't mention it. The Torah says, just focuses on Moshe and Aaron because they were the essential, they were the key ones. Nechama Leibowitz doesn't quite buy this. She says, if the argument is that the Torah doesn't waste its words, well, it would have been one extra word to say Moshe, Aaron, V'Hazakanim. And the elders, that doesn't seem to be the economy of words that the Torah normally is concerned with. The argument that they were not worthy of mention because they did no speaking is also not convincing. Surely the presence of a weighty delegation comprising not only Moshe and Aaron, but also the representatives of the whole Jewish people qualified for a mention. So she's not buying it. She says, if they were there, the Torah should have told us that they went as God told them to do. And so there's a whole second school of thought. Rashi quotes the Medrash Rabbah. I'll just summarize. We'll quickly go through the Medrash. The Medrash tells us, Achar ba'u Moshe v'Aharon, Hechan halchu hazekanim shelo chashav otam imahem. Medrash says, what about the Moshe and Aaron went to Paro? What about the elders? Shekvar marlo Kadosh Baruch Hu v'atat v'tignei Israel. God told him that the elders should go with you. Amru Rabotenu, halchu imahem hazekanim, vayu meganvin et atzman v'nishmatin echad shnaim shnaim. The elders, the rabbis tell us that no, the elders did in fact go with Moshe and Aaron as they set out for Paro's palace, and then slowly they dropped out, one by one, two by two, until halchu lahen kivan shigia lepaltin shel Paro lo nimtza echad, until eventually they get to the palace and only Moshe and Aaron are left. The elders started out with them, and then they are no more. They get scared, they get cold feet, they can't do it. Shekin Kativ Achar Ba'u Moshe v'Aharon Heichana Zekeinim Ela Shalchu Lachem, as it says that that Moshe and Aaron came to Paro, where are the elders? Rather, it must be that they dropped off; they were no longer with them. Amar Lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kach Asitem. So God tells to them, you did this. You didn't go with Moshe and Aaron when I told you that you should. Chayechem Shani Parei Alachem. I am going to punish you for this. Imatai, when are they punished? B'sha'ah sha'ala Moshe ve'Aaron im haZekenim lahar Sinai lekabel haTorah. When Moshe and Aaron, when the elders went to up Har Sinai to get the Torah, hechazir on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Remember, the elders didn't go to the same level as Moshe and Aaron went. Aaron didn't go to the same level as Moshe, but they didn't go even as far as Aaron. Shene'emar el haZekenim amar shevu lanu bazeh, as it says, God tells the elders, you stay back here. So they're punished for not carrying out the mission and not going with Moshe and Aaron. The Netziv has a different proof or different explanation for what happened. Ba'u Moshe v'Aaron. Again, the Torah says Moshe and Aaron came livadam. They came alone. Shelo hayta ha'emunah shleima sheyagia ad mesirat nefesh leilecho paro. Because the faith of the elders of the Zekeinim was not so strong that they would put themselves at their lives at risk in order to go to Paro. Varbiarnush lo hayta haftachat Hashem ubata ata v'ziknei Israel ela kashiesh v'shamu likolecha. He brings an interesting proof. Remember, Moshe is afraid that he can't speak, that they're not going to let that, so Aaron has to be his spokesperson. God made a promise that the elders will go with you when vishamu likolecha, when they listen to your voice, Moshe. But since Moshe didn't speak to them, Aaron spoke to them, they weren't fully won over, right? Because when Moshe speaks, Shechina medaberet mitoch grono, then the Shechina, the divine presence, would be speaking from Moshe's throat. Lokein ata shelo shamu ela kol Aharon, but that's not true here because up until this point they only heard Aaron's voice and not Moshe's. So therefore, they have an excuse, I guess, the Steve says, for not going with Moshe and Aaron to Paro. Okay, so we have this really interesting pshat debate as to whether the Zekeinim went with Moshe and Aaron to Paro or not. Right? At least one significant school of thought says that no, they didn't go, and that they were somehow punished for not going. That they showed a lack of faith.
We seem to be giving thoughts and preferences and so on to the Zekeinim.
Yeah.
But it could be that they are simply following orders, following what they should be doing, and don't have, independent frustrations or complaints or whatever.
So what orders are they following?
Hashem's?
They didn't go. If they're following Hashem's orders, then they should go.
They just violated this one.
Right? They seem to be violating Hashem's orders.
Wait, they were commanded to go to Paro?
Yeah. God tells Moshe,
it's mentioned in Hashem's name. Yeah, he says so.
Yeah, that's how he started everything.
Oh,
right.
We shall go with the elders. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I thought this was all very interesting. And then there's one final piece that I wanted to point out. And again, we're going to leave this as food for thought. I welcome any comments on it. But after Moshe and Aaron, with or without the elders, depending on which school of thought has won you over at this point. But after they tell Paro the first time, God has appeared to us and told us that we need to, that we need to go worship for 3 days. So then we know that Paro gives the command that no, they're clearly distracted, they're not working hard enough, they're too idle, so therefore we're gonna make the burden more difficult to them. But Paro gives this commandment, Vaitzav Paro bayomahu et hanogsim ba'am ve'et shotrav lemor. Paro charged the taskmasters and the overseers, saying, don't give them straw. but we're not going to provide them the straw, but we're not going to reduce their quantity of bricks they have to produce every day. In verse 10, so the taskmasters and the overseers go out and they tell the nation this. And verse 13, right? So they insist you must continue to produce the same amount and the same rate of bricks that you're producing when the straw was provided for you. Vayukusho tre b'nei Israel asher samu aleihem noksei paro lemor madua lo chilitem chokchem liobon kitmol shilshom. So the shotrim, the overseers, yell or hit the taskmaster, saying, "Why are they not producing the same amount of bricks?" Vayavo shotrei b'nei Israel vayitzaku el paro lemor lama tasecho la'avadecha. The shotrei b'nei Israel, the taskmasters of the Jewish people, go and they scream to Paro, "Why are you doing this to your servants? Teven ein nitan la'avadecha levenim omrim lanu asu v'hinei avadecha mukim v'chatat amecha." You're not providing them the brick, and you're yelling at them, and they're being punished. And then Paro says, it's because they clearly have too much time on their hands. They're asking these crazy things to go and worship some God I've never heard of in the desert. Rashi tells us, Hanoksim, the taskmasters, Mitzriim hayu. These are Egyptians. V'hashotrim hayu Yisraelim. And the shotrim are the overseers, as it was translated, are Israelites. Hanoges minune al kama shotrim, right? So there was a pyramid level of oversight. So
So you
each
invented it.
noges, each right, pyramid, pun intended. So each taskmaster, each Egyptian official was given a certain number of companies of slaves who were overseen by a Hebrew overseer, and that was the basic structure. Hashoter Mimuneh Lirdot Bosei Amalacha, and the shoter, the taskmaster, was tasked with overseeing the workers. And then Sarn again sells it out, taskmasters and foremen. In the Egyptian corvée system, I don't know what a corvée system is, the workers were organized into manageable gangs, each headed by a foreman from among their own. He in turn was directly responsible to his superior taskmaster, as verses 14 and 20 to 21 show. The foremen were Israelites, the taskmasters Egyptian. The foreman kept careful logs of their wards and activities of each. Several such logs are extant, some from the time of Ramses. And then he says, interestingly, the word shoter, foreman or taskmaster, derives from a stem from a shoresh meaning to write, that they would keep tabs on it. I thought that was very interesting. But what struck me as really interesting is as we're trying to establish who the leaders of the nation are and what the roles of the Zekeinim are, right? So the Zekeinim seem to be the favored, privileged leaders. And yet, they're presented, at least in that Medrash and brought by Rashi, in a fairly negative light. They are not up to the task. They are cowardly. They don't come to Paro. They're afraid. And it's these Nogsim, these taskmasters, who are able to stand up to Paro and say, this isn't fair. Now, Paro doesn't listen to them, but at least they have the courage and the backbone to say, this isn't right. Let's do something. And so it just strikes me as interesting. I don't have it all worked out or a clear conclusion in my head. I think that there is something very interesting also about the beginning of the parsha, where we're introduced to the Mialdot, the midwives, who also defy Paro's orders, and these Noksim at the end, as opposed to the Zekeinim, who continue to be the preferred. Not, they're not the Moshe and Aaron level of leaders, but they seem to be the established leaders that moving forward as well. And they're presented in a more critical light. So it certainly is saying something about the leadership of the nation and the nature of the leadership and what's required and what's expected. I don't fully know what it is though. So I'm gonna end there. Does anyone has any initial reactions or thoughts? I'd love to hear it. If you need some time to mull it over as well, happy to continue the conversation by email or in Shul on Shabbos also. Um,
Well, there are some parallels that one could think of. I happen to be reading a book about the Warsaw Ghetto,
mhm.
and there are various people who step up at difficult times to do the things, and yet there are some who are like a council of elders that will, the older ones that meet together and try to figure out what might happen next and what they should do now and all of that. That would be an interesting comparison.
Yeah, so when I
But
when I when I was, my first thought on the Noksim, these Hebrew taskmasters, was about the capos in the
Yeah.
ghettos.
Mhm,
Or the
mhm,
Judenrat.
sure,
Yeah,
sure. Mhm.
and very very complicated, very complicated, and what the historical judgment on them is also very complicated and not so clear cut. But that was my thought also. Um,
It
yeah,
seems as if the modern state of Israel also really has a problem because we don't have one group of recognized elders.
that's
We
for sure.
have a Knesset that its initial numbers, didn't they try to have 70 or something? I mean,
120,
they
120.
120, that's right, it wasn't 70. But if we had each group really represented with elders across a great number of different cultures or some rubric or other, we would have much more solidity that way. Um, our Senate is supposed to provide us with something like that, but of course that's another whole question of whether it does or not.
Yeah,
But we really sorely need some kind of group. I just wanted to end by saying that the Iroquois people and several others in those 7 nations did have councils, but the councils were women, and
hmm.
they counseled the warriors about what they should do.
Okay,
So
interesting.
so it's the mothers and the brothers kind of system, which are in more matrilineal cultures. The mothers would be in the council, and then the brothers would have to do play both other political roles, and their major role would be to defend. And so that is something that we definitely get dealing with also in Eretz Israel. Do we have a group like that? No, we
Yeah,
don't. We are really on the verge of civil war there, and it's terrible. We don't have the institutions really that we need. Maybe, I don't know.
yeah.
And I wanted to share just an idea, because
Hmm.
I know you mentioned the Mialdot, and I know that there are some commentators who argue that the Mialdot were not actually like Hebrews,
Right,
but they were the Mialdot to the Hebrews,
right.
right? And I wonder if there's somewhere to say that, like in the reading of Sefer in Bereshit, when it's when Yosef's going to bury his father, right? It's Kol Ziknei Beito and V'chol Ziknei Eretz Mitzrayim. So we know that Zekeinim is an Egyptian thing, not an Israelite thing, right? And I wonder if Ziknei Yisrael are, there's some, I don't know, maybe there's a relationship there. Maybe there's the government in Egypt is not as unified as we like to think about it, and that there are these people that are supposed to come with Moshe to advocate to Paro and sort of be part of the process of saying, Paro, I think we should let these people go. And maybe that's why Paro really only consults with his like Khartoumim all along, doesn't really consult with any sort of advisors. So it'd be
Interesting.
just a very different read
Yeah,
from the Rishonim, which sees this as like very binary, right? All the Jews were good, not all of them, obviously. except for a couple, and all the Egyptians were bad. But I wonder if it's actually a little bit more complicated than that.
It's usually a
Just a thought.
safe assumption that it's more complicated.
Yeah, yeah,
That we can agree on, right?
true.
Okay, I hope this was interesting. Again, it sort
Oh.
of just sparked a question for me. I had to explore it, and I'm glad. I appreciate everyone exploring together with me. Um, Again, looking forward to seeing you all in Shul this coming Shabbos. Have a great rest of the week, and meet again next Tuesday night on Zoom.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.